Hi everybody, I'm Ryan, and over the course of the past month or two, I've released a lot of sideboard guides in Standard. And a lot of people pretty much consume content for sideboard guides, and so what I wanted to do is combine all of the sideboard guides I have for this Standard that's going on right now into one big video for you to enjoy. Enjoy! So this is Esper's Self Bounce. As far as the sideboard goes, Destroy Evil, great for these like large creatures and also mostly enchantments. Rest in Peace as our graveyard hate. Sheltered by Ghosts really as our aggressive deck hate. Negate is just a solid card against decks like Domain or Mono White or things like that. Cut Down, great aggressive deck hate for 1 mana. Same thing with Wish's Vanity. And then we're playing 2 Normalize just as a catch-all counterspell. We're going to start with Dimir Midrange, which is the most popular deck in Standard. Against Dimir Midrange, we are bringing in our Cut Downs and Wish's Vanity. Whoops. Because if they're unable to get Kaido on the battlefield or draw extra cards off of Enduring Curiosity, then we're sitting pretty. We're going to be cutting Sheltered by Ghosts because it's for the aggressive decks. And then Mockingbird and Defiled Crypt are really our flex slots. So this is how we're going to sideboard against Dimir. The second most popular deck in Standard is the Mirror Match. In the Esper Self Bounce Mirror, we are bringing in Negate. We're bringing in No More Lies. Really, it's really important to make sure this town ain't big enough, like just never, ever resolves. And then I'm a fan of these removal spells for the little things. We're going to be bringing out our flex slots right off the bat. Then I really think Optimistic Scavenger is just our next worst card, so we're going to be shaving on Optimistic Scavenger, and that's how I'm going to sideboard in the Mirror Match. The third most popular deck is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari, I like Destroy Evil because, you know, it deals with Shieldred, deals with Preacher. If they're playing the Demon package, it deals with the Demon Rooms. And really, I'm all set with the rest of these cards. Bringing out Sheltered by Ghosts, just, again, because it's for the aggressive decks. And we're bringing out Mockingbird, and that's how we're going to sideboard against Golgari. The fourth most popular deck is the Gruul Aggro deck. And we're going to sideboard the same against Gruul Aggro as we do with Gruul Prowess and Mono Red Prowess. And that's the 4th, 5th, and 6th most popular decks. We're going to combine all those into one. Bringing in Sheltered by Ghosts, giving lifelink and removing a creature is exactly what we want to do against those decks. Bringing in Cut Down, and we're bringing in Witch's Vanity. We're going to be bringing out all of the cards that require some work to get going. So Defiled Crypt, Mockingbird, and then I'm not a fan of Kaido, and I like everything else. So this is how I'm going to sideboard against the red aggressive decks. The 7th most popular deck is Azorius Tempo. Against Azorius Tempo, I love Destroy Evil, deals with the creatures that we care about. Maybe. There we go. We're bringing in Rest in Peace because it means they can just never, ever get an Oculus on the battlefield. Haughty Jin's always really small. You know, all that stuff. I'm loving Negate. And then we're going to be cutting Nowhere to Run because it doesn't actually kill any of the opponent's creatures. We're going to be cutting Sheltered by Ghosts, Defiled Crypt, and then a single Mockingbird, and that's how I sideboard against Azorius Oculus. The 8th most popular deck is Domain. Against Domain, Destroy Evil is insanely good. We're bringing in Negate as well, and No More Lies is awesome too, just being able to counter their high value threats. Nowhere to Run is just awful. Same thing with Sheltered by Ghosts. Defiled Crypt is too slow, and that's how we're going to sideboard against Domain. The 9th most popular deck is the Jeskai Convoke deck. Against Jeskai Convoke, we're bringing in this removal just to try to keep them off of their combo as long as possible. And we're going to be bringing out these cards that just don't do anything. So that's how I sideboard against Jeskai Convoke. And then the 10th most popular deck is Mono White against Mono White. Bringing in Negate, we're bringing in our Destroy Evils, and then we're going to bring in our No More Lies. Basically, we're trying to keep them off of their draw engines. Nowhere to Run does simply nothing. Sheltered by Ghosts does very little, and then we're just going to shave a Mockingbird. This is how I sideboard against Mono White. I think I meant solely focus on the sideboard, but that's okay. So as far as sideboard goes, Lithomantic Barrage is good against these white and blue creatures and planeswalkers, obviously. Torch the Tower, very good against the aggressive decks, and the exile can sometimes really matter. Twisted Fealty, when your opponent is casting a bunch of very powerful big boy creatures. Urbra's Forge against decks with board wipes or a lot of removal or looking to go really long with you. Witchstalker Frenzy, really good against decks that have 5 or less toughness blockers and they plan on blocking us. And then Sunspine Lynx is very good against decks that don't play a lot of basic lands, but also against decks that are looking to gain life. With that being said, the most popular deck in Standard is Dimir Midrange. Against Dimir midrange, Lithomantic Barrage is awesome, especially since it can't be countered. Torch Tower is pretty good as well, being able to take out all of their creatures, and especially taking out Enduring Curiosity like forever. That being said, we don't want to overdo it with our removal, so I like taking out the Witchstalker Frenzy, and they have an insane amount of removal as well, and they're really not looking to block a lot of the time, so we're going to take out Summon of Monstrous Rage, and that's how I sideboard against Dimir. The second most popular deck in Standard is Golgari midrange. Against Golgari midrange, Witchstalker Frenzy is a little bit better, and Torch the Tower is, and Lithomantic Barrage obviously, are a little bit worse. I like Sunspine Links, because while they have a pretty large amount of basics, they are looking to gain life, and that can kind of stop it. Stops the Crazy Gix command, things like that. Or I guess it can stop the Crazy Gix command. It can just make you sacrifice it. And I like Urbrass Forge. It's kind of hard for them to deal with, especially if they're looking to gain life or just deal with our stuff. Monstrous Rage is coming out first and foremost. They have even more removal than Dimir. And I'm actually not a big fan of Screaming Nemesis because they have an insane amount of removal and they can just remove it. And that's kind of bad, because if they're just removing it with non-damage, Screaming Nemesis kind of loses his point. So that's how I sideboard against Golgari midrange. The third most popular deck is Gruul Prowess, and just to let you know, the mono red deck is also the 8th most popular deck, and we're going to sideboard the same against Gruul Prowess and mono red. And the Gruul aggro deck, which is the 6th most popular deck, we're going to sideboard the same against essentially all 3 of them. So Gruul Prowess, Gruul aggro, and mono red Prowess being the 3rd, the 6th, and the 8th most popular decks. The way we're going to sideboard against that is the 4 Torch the Tower, obviously. Need as much removal as possible. And the Witchstalker Frenzy. I'm going to cut probably the worst card in the deck, which is a Monastery Swiftspear, and then Shave on a Monstrous Rage, just so they very often have a lot of removal. And this is how I'm going to sideboard against the red aggro decks. The 4th most popular deck is the Esper Self Bounce deck. Against this deck, Lithomantic Barrage is pretty solid. Also a fan of Sunspine Links because they do gain a reasonable amount of life, especially post board. And I'm a fan of Torch the Tower, just removing things from being in the way. We have to take on the Monstrous Rage just because they have an insane amount of removal, even bounce removal. And similarly, Screaming Nemesis is not so good just because often we just have to recast it over and over and over and it just does nothing. So it's on the sideboard against the Esper Pixies or Esper Self-Bounce deck. The 5th most popular deck is the Jeskai Convoke deck. Against Jeskai Convoke, we like Lithomantic Barrage. We like Witchstalker Frenzy. Again, we're just getting things out of the way. I'm a fan of Sunspine Links, so they are unable to gain life. And then we're just going to be cutting down on Lightning Strikes, because meh. And on Monastery Swiftspear, and that's how I'm going to sideboard against the Jeskai Convoke deck. Lightning Strike just isn't that good. The 6th most popular deck is Gruul aggro. We've already talked about that. And the 7th most popular deck is Domain. Against Domain, Twisted Fealty is super good. Sunspine Links is super good as well. And Witchstalker Frenzy is also very, very good. We are sideboarding out of our Lightning Strikes because it doesn't actually kill anything. And similarly with Burst Lightning. And that's how I'm going to sideboard against the Zero Overlord's Domain deck. The 8th most popular deck is Mono Red, which is the Mirror Match. We've already talked about that. And so we're going to talk about the Mono White Token Control deck. Against this deck, Urbrass Forge is obviously great because they're looking to go super, super long with us. Like Lithomantic Barrage, so they can get rid of their Planeswalkers and, all that stuff. Phasas, whatever. And then we're going to be taking out Lightning Strike. It doesn't really kill anything in our opponent's deck. We kind of have to keep the Monstrous Rage in, even though they have a ton of removal, because we need a way to get through the insects. So we're just going to shave on a single Burst Lightning. That's how I'm going to sideboard against Mono White tokens. And the 10th most popular deck is the Azorius Convoke deck, the Regal Bunnicorn whatever deck. Against this deck, we're going to side in Lithomantic Barrage. We're going to side in Torch the Tower. This spot removal is actually a little bit better against them. I like Sunspine Links because Sheltered by Ghosts is super, super, super scary. And then Witchstalker Frenzy. We're going to be taking out Monstrous Rage. I'm not a fan of Swiftspear, and we're going to shave on a Screaming Nemesis. That's why I sideboard against Azorius Convoke. So this is red-green aggro in Standard. One of the best decks in Standard, actually. And as far as the sideboard goes, Lithomantic Barrage against problematic creatures that are white or blue. Torch the Tower for mostly aggressive decks, also decent against the enduring cards. Scorching Shot, good against big blockers. Urbrass Forge, we're going to be sideboarding in against decks that have a lot of removal and are likely going to go long with us. Pop Ash Formation, decent. Enchantment Hate, also good against different flyers like in the blue deck. And then the 4th Questing Druid, again, for decks that are going to go long and that we need to grind with. So the most popular deck is Dimir Midrange. We're going to be sided in Lithomantic Barrage and Torch the Tower just to be able to deal with their creatures, and then we're going to power through the rest of the deck. However, they are looking to grind with us and go long, and they post-board, they are pretty good at dealing with our aggro, so siding into the Questing Druid's pretty solid. That being said, I'm not a big fan of Monstrous Rage. They don't have a lot of blockers to trample over anyway, that they do have a lot of removal. And I like shaving on Innkeeper's Talent and Screaming Nemesis just because they can easily deal with Screaming Nemesis with their removal, like way too easy, and we want damage to be dealt, and Innkeeper's Talent requires us to have creatures, so it's kind of tough, especially when we're bringing in so many non-creature spells. So it's sideboard against Dimir Midrange. The second most popular deck is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari Midrange, we're going to decide in Scorching Shot so we can get rid of the big butted blockers. Urbrass Forge, because they're looking to go long. They have a lot of really, really good removal. And then similarly with Questing Druid. Just like before, we're going to sideboard out of our Monstrous Rage because they have so much removal, especially post-board. And I'm really not a fan of Screaming Nemesis against this deck. And that's how I sideboard against Golgari. The third most popular deck is the Mirror Match. And in fact, we're going to sideboard the same in the Mirror. We're going to sideboard the same against the Gruul Aggro deck, not necessarily the Prowess deck. So the Gruul Prowess deck's third most popular, Gruul Aggro deck's the 6th most popular, and then the Mono Red deck is the 8th most popular. We're going to sideboard the same against all of them. And we're going to sideboard in the Torch the Towers, the Scorching Shots, and because we know we're siding so much removal, again, I'm not a fan of Monstrous Rage. Monstrous Rage is such a better like game 1 card, and we're going to shave on Questing Druid as well, and that's how we're going to sideboard in the Mirror. The 4th most popular deck is the Esper Self Bounce deck. Lithomantic Barrage is really solid, as well as Torch the Tower again, and this is tough because they have so much removal and really good blockers. Screaming Nemesis ends up being pretty bad being 3 mana though, because they can bounce things so well. And because of all that removal, we're going to shave on Monstrous Rage, and this is how I sideboard against the Esper Pixie Esper Self-Bounce deck. The 5th most popular deck is the Jeskai Convoke deck. Against Jeskai Convoke, Lithomantic Barrage is pretty solid, and frankly, other than that, we're just going to try to be faster than them. Lithomantic Barrage, by the way, can't be countered, also gets through Ward, so it's really good against Sheltered by Ghosts, which is how they beat us. And we're just going to shave on Questing Druid. We want to be as low to the ground and as aggressive as possible, and this is how I sideboard against Jeskai Convoke. We've already talked about Gruul Aggro, which is the 6th most popular deck. The 7th most popular deck is Domain. Against Domain, we're bringing in Scorching Shot to get rid of their big butted stuff. Paw Patch Formation because they have so many enchantments. Urbrass Forge because they have board wipes and are pretty good at dealing with what we're doing. And then similarly with Questing Druid. I do not think Screaming Nemesis is very good against this deck because they are rarely looking to block. They're just gaining a bunch of life, attacking and removing us. Because they have so much removal, we don't like Monstrous Rage. And frankly, because a lot of that removal is spot removal, we're going to shave on Snakeskin Veil, and that's how I'm going to sideboard against Domain. The 8th most popular deck is Mono Red, which we've already talked about. And so we're going to go to the 9th most popular deck, which is Mono White Tokens. Against Mono White, we're bringing in Urbrass Forge because they are looking to go really, really long. We're a fan of Lithomantic Barrage, deals with their planeswalkers and problematic creatures. And I really like Questing Druid. We're going to be sideboarding out a lot of these cards that require us to have other creatures for them to be good. I'm also not a fan of Snakeskin Veil just because a lot of their removal are like literally board wipes. And Burst Lightning doesn't really do that much. We do like Monstrous Rage, even though there's a ton of removal, because we really need to get through their tokens, though. So that's how I'm going to sideboard against Mono White. The 10th most popular deck is Azorius Convoke. Against Azorius Convoke, Lithomantic Barrage is awesome. We're also a fan of Scorching Shot. They're a lot more big creature-based than the Jeskai Convoke deck, so Azorius Convoke, we're sideboarding just a little bit differently. I'm also a fan of Torch the Tower. We're going to sideboard out of our Questing Druids because we really aren't looking to go long. And I really don't like Innkeeper's Talent. It just is too slow and we really need to be moving as fast as we can. And we're just going to shave on Screaming Nemesis because there's not a lot of combat that's going to be happening. There's going to be a lot of tapping down and removal, and that's pretty much it. So that's how I'm going to sideboard against Azorius Convoke. So this is Domain. And before we start talking about the top 10 most popular decks, we should start looking at the sideboard. So Authority of the Consuls is for the super aggressive decks, especially the hasting decks. Elspeth Smite similarly for those type of decks as well, but also is a little bit more of a diverse removal spell. Rest in Peace is mostly for like the Tolarian Terror decks and any weird Reanimator decks hanging out. Split Up is a cheap, though conditional board wipe, but very good against these aggressive strategies where we really need the earliest board wipe possible. Beza is decent against mid-range, but is mostly in our deck for aggro, being able to gain life, be a blocker, and possibly produce even more blockers. Negate, again, for non-creature spells, we're talking like the Mirror Match or Control or anything like that. Obstinate Baloth is starting to be played in these domain sideboards. One, because it's good against the aggressive decks as a blocker and gains life, but also the Esper Self Bounce often has you discard cards with Hopeless Nightmare, which is very good against our deck. And then playing turn 1 Hopeless Nightmare and us just putting Obstinate Baloth on the battlefield can just win us the game against those Esper Self Bounce decks, which I found to be kind of a bad matchup. Nissa Ascended Animist is very good against any deck that plays a lot of artifacts or enchantments, something like the Mirror Match, but also really good against any slow deck because it's a great finisher. And then Doppelgang is an insane finisher for any of these slow decks. So the most popular deck in Standard is Dimir Midrange. Against Dimir, we are bringing in Elspeth's Smite. Being able to deal with those creatures that are trying to draw a ton of cards against us is super important. And that is really all I like against the deck. Mostly because I don't really like Split Up, because it's really hard to wipe their board in that way. And then we're also just going to shave Overlord of the Flood Pits. It's the worst Overlord by quite a bit, and we're going to be shaving Overlord of Flood Pits like a lot, frankly. But this is our sideboard against Dimir Midrange. The second most popular deck is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari Midrange, we are siding in Nissa and Doppelgang just as those finishers like we talked about. But frankly, other than that, I'm running it back. This is an insanely good matchup. I'm bringing out an Elspeth Smite and a Split Up because those are mostly focused on the aggro decks, and that's how I sideboard against Golgari. The third most popular deck is the new hotness to Standard is the Esper Self Bounce deck. Against this deck, I've found that you need to be as aggressive as possible because if you let them do their thing, it's kind of just over. But Obstinate Baloth is excellent because of Hopeless Nightmare, and it helps you live, frankly. Split Up is decent to just kind of deal with their creatures. Negate is very, very good because countering this town ain't big enough, or Storm Chaser's Talon is just super important. And then Beza mostly just have another creature to be attacking with. Gonna be taking out the Elspeth Smite. We can't really rely on it being a good counterspell. We're going to take out the Atraxa package. The Analyze the Pollen and Atraxa often kind of go together. And be taking out Overlord of the Flood Pits and just shaving on a Zur. The fourth Zur is pretty much a flex slot, so we'll be shaving the fourth Zur quite a bit as well, too. But this is how I sideboard against the Esper Self-Bounce deck. The fourth most popular deck is Gruul Prowess. Also the slightly different deck, Gruul Aggro, is the fifth most popular deck, and Mono Red Prowess is the eighth most popular deck, and we're going to sideboard the same against all of them. The Prowess version being the Slickshot Show-Off version, the aggro version being the non-Slickshot Show-Off version. But we're going to sideboard the same against all three of those decks. So we're going to bring in Authority of the Consuls, we're going to bring in Elspeth Smite, we're going to bring in Split Up, we're going to bring in Beza, and we are going to bring in Obstinate Baloth. Notice the pretty big sideboard because this is probably our worst matchup. We're going to bring out the Atraxa package because we can't realistically get that on the battlefield. We're going to bring out Up the Beanstalk because we are not interested in card advantage. Bring out Overlord of the Flood Pits because we aren't really looking to draw cards. And we're just going to shave a white Overlord. While being decent blockers, it's really easy for them to outsize the blockers. And realistically, we aren't casting the front face of it. So that's how I sideboard against the Gruul and Mono Red aggro decks. So we've already talked about the fifth most popular deck being Gruul aggro. So the sixth most popular deck is Domain, the Mirror Match. Against the Mirror, we're going to be bringing in Negate, we're going to be bringing in Nissa, and we're going to be bringing in Doppelgang. We're going to be siding out of Elspeth Smite. Split Up just frankly isn't very good. I also like bringing out Day of Judgment, because we need our cards to do more than just wipe the board. And shaving on a Sunfall. I like everything else. Keeping one Sunfall is totally fine. That's how I sideboard in the Mirror. The seventh most popular deck is the Jeskai Convoke deck. Against Jeskai Convoke, I like bringing in Authority of the Consuls. Split Up is unreasonably good. I really like Beza just because it's an aggro deck. And similarly with Obstinate Baloth, we're going to be bringing out the Atraxa package and Up the Beanstalk for similar reasons, right? I'm not looking to play that long game. I'm looking to answer what they're doing and move on. This high sideboard against Jeskai Convoke. We've already talked about the eighth most popular deck, which is Mono Red Prowess. So the ninth most popular deck is the Mono White Token Control deck. Against this deck, we are bringing in Negate, we are bringing in Nissa and Doppelgang, just mostly as finishers. We are siding out of Elspeth Smite. I don't like Split Up, but I do like the other board wipes being able to just kind of reset after the control craziness. And we're going to just be shaving on Zur and Blue Overlord, and that's how I sideboard against mono white. And then the 10th most popular deck is the Azorius Convoke deck, Azorius Aggro, Azorius Curiosity, whatever you want to call it. I really like Authority against this deck. I also like Elspeth Smite more against this deck than the Jeskai deck. Being able to deal with Enduring Curiosity forever is really nice. Split Up is very good, and Obstinate Bale is very good, and Beza is very good. We're going to side out of our Atraxa package, get rid of Overlord of the Flood Pits. I'm not looking to grind, so I'm going to shave on cut up the Beanstalk, excuse me. And then we're going to cut a single Zur, and that's how I sideboard against the Azorius deck. So this is the Dimir mid-range deck, and before we get into how to sideboard, let's talk about the actual sideboard cards and what the rules are. Negate fights against non-creature spells, obviously. Tishana's Tidebinder is to attack these cards that have triggers, obviously, and good against decks that we want to play instant speed at. Cut down for these aggressive decks, duress for these control and decks that have a lot of targets. Preacher of the Schism when we want to do a little transformative thing where we turn into like a more focused mid-range deck rather than doing tempo stuff. Same thing for Shieldred. Gix's Command is mostly for aggressive decks, being able to give lifelink and kind of turn the corner. And then Ghost Vacuum is our graveyard hate. So the most popular deck in Standard is the Mirror Match. In the Mirror Match, we're bringing in Cut Down because it hits a lot of the targets. We're bringing in Tishana's Tidebinder because able to hit like an Enduring Curiosity or a Fairy Mastermind trigger is really solid. We're bringing in Shieldred just in case we fall behind in the draw cards portion. We can push through that little extra damage. And we're going to be bringing out Anoint with Affliction. Yes, it deals with these creatures, but for 1 more mana than Cut Down and doesn't deal with Enduring Curiosity or Kaido, which is what really, really matters. And we're going to be siding out of our Spell Stutter. Everything costs so little that it's reasonably easy to play around. And so I sideboard in the Mirror Match. The second most popular deck, is Golgari midrange. Against Golgari, again, we're a fan of Tishana's Tidebinder, being able to hit Shieldred or Preacher or Glissa, or there's so many things. I'm also a fan of doing a little bit of that transformative thing, bringing in Preachers and Shieldred to be able to keep up with their midrange plan. Cut Down is really bad. It deals with Dread Knight. It can hit Llanowar Elves, which is kind of nice, but Feyboom Trick kind of doesn't matter because they don't have many flyers anyway. And then we're going to shave on Flood Pits Drowner because we really just want to outcard them with Enduring Curiosity and like hit them in the air and nickel and dime them. And these creatures are kind of just better in keeping up with the mid-range plan than Flood Pits Drowner. So I sideboard against Golgari mid. The third most popular deck is the Gruul Prowess, Gruul Aggro deck, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, we're bringing in the Cut Downs, we're bringing in the Shieldreds, we're bringing in Preacher of the Schisms. Just because it's an awesome blocker, we're bringing in Gift Command. Tishana's Tidebinder, not good. Flayboom Trick is just not good. I also think we need to cut Kaidos against this deck because we're not going to be like attacking and want to like remove a blocker for us very often. Then Counter Magic is historically pretty bad against aggressive decks, so that's how I sideboard against Gruul Prowess. The fourth most popular deck is Mono Red Prowess. We're going to sideboard the same as we did with Gruul Prowess. Okay, bye. And also the same with Boros Burn, which is the 10th most popular deck. I'll mention that when we get there. The Jeskai Convoke deck is the 5th most popular deck. Against Jeskai Convoke, I am a fan of Cut Down. I'm a fan of Tishana's Tidebinder. It stops Sheltered by Ghosts. It stops Night Errant. It stops Imidane's Recruiter triggers. Gix's Command is awesome as well as a board wipe. But we also have cards on our main deck that are kind of just bad. So for example, Flood Pits Drowner, don't really care about that card. They have way too many blockers. There aren't many key individual cards that we want to make sure we get rid of. Also, I'm not a big fan of Shieldred's Edict for kind of similar reasons. And similarly, because they're an aggressive deck, I like cutting Kaido, which gives us room to bring in all of these mid-range hate cards. And so sideboard against Jeskai Convoke. The 6th most popular deck is the Domain Zur Overlords deck. Against this deck, we're bringing in Negate, being able to hit things like Leyline Binding or, Get Lost or Sunfall, all very important. Also, Tishana's Tidebinder is pretty excellent, being able to turn off all of those triggers and Zur activations. Similarly, also a fan of Duress. And then we're cutting the Cut Downs and the Anoint with Affliction. Anoint with Affliction only hits Zur exclusively. And really, our main strategy is very good against Domain already. So that's how I sideboard against Domain. The 7th most popular deck is Mono White Tokens, the Mono White Control deck. Bringing in Negates because it's mostly non-creature spells. Bringing in Tishana's Tidebinder, good against Enduring Innocence, Beza, Overlord, the Planeswalker, Elspeth, all very good. Duress as well. And I don't have a lot of flyers, so our primary game plan is actually pretty decent. So we're going to be bringing out our cut downs, only really deals with a token here or there, and Anoint with Affliction. And so I sideboard against mono white tokens. The 8th most popular deck is the Temur Flood Collar combo. Against the Temur Flood Collar deck, we kind of just need to stop what they're doing. So Duress and Negate are great. Same thing with Tishaana's Tidebinder. I don't think we can afford to play Cut Down because so many things can get so much bigger over time. I think it gets stuck in your hand like a lot. I'm not a big fan of Flayboom Trick, and we're going to shave up Flood Pit's Drowner, and that's how I sideboard against the Flood Collar combo. The 9th most popular deck is the Azorius Convoke deck / Azorius Flash / Enduring Curiosity Steel Seraph goodies. I'm going to sideboard really similar to the way we did with the other deck. Except I do like the counter magic a little bit more against this deck because they have big payoffs like Steel Seraph and Enduring Curiosity and Regal Bunicorn and things like that. And so we're just going to shave the Kaidos for a Tidebinder and Gix Command, and that's how we sideboard against Azorius Convoke. I think they're a slightly worse Convoke deck, and we can play on our axis a little bit more than against the Jeskai Convoke. And since we've already talked about the 10th most popular deck, which is Boros Burn, that's how you sideboard against the top 10 most popular decks. So this is my green-black mid-range deck. I'm off the Demons version. This is purely a mid-range version. And if you're interested in an analysis of the deck, I've already done that. You should check that out. This is just focused on the sideboard, so let's talk about these sideboard cards. Cut Down is for these aggressive decks. Duress is for like control or domain or really anything with a lot of non-creature spells that we care about. The End is really for like mid-range decks. It's a decent planeswalker removal as well. Harvester of Misery we're playing as a 4 of, mostly for tokens decks. It's decent against Dimir, also very good against the aggressive decks. Tear Sunder is a decent all-around removal, but also targeted enchantment and artifact tape. Same thing with Tranquil Throwback. Also, it gains life and is a blocker, so it's decent against aggressive decks. And then Nissa Ascended Animist is great against control, great against these mid-range decks, and great artifact and enchantment hate. So the most popular deck in Standard is Dimir Midrange. Against Dimir Midrange, we are bringing in Cut Down. We are bringing in The End. We're bringing in Harvester of Misery. We're going to be bringing out Terror Sunder. Gix Command can be good, but I don't think it's good that often. I like cutting Glissa as well because, frankly, they aren't looking to block and are just going to remove it. And Glissa's not going to be blocking flyers anyway. I just like cutting Glissa. This is how I sideboard against Dimir midrange. The second most popular deck is the mirror match, is Golgari midrange. Against Golgari midrange, we're bringing in The End again. We're bringing in Terra Sunder, it's decent exile removal for 4 mana, similar to The End. And we're bringing in Nissa just as a finisher. We're taking out Gix Command, because it doesn't really do anything in this matchup, but get things back, and we don't really have a lot to get back that we really care about. And Cut Down's like really bad, so I guess we keep one Gix Command in. This is how we sideboard in the mirror match. The third most popular deck is the Gruul Prowess deck. Against Gruul Prowess, we're bringing in Cut Down, we're bringing in the 4 Harvester of Misery, and we're bringing in Tranquil Throwback to gain life and just be a blocker. We're taking out these expensive removal spells and things that don't really do anything. Like anything over 3 mana that doesn't just win the game or is difficult to answer, we kind of have to take out. Similar to Terra Sunder, which we kind of have to treat like a 4 mana spell. Glissa is just too easy for them to answer. And then we're taking out Blot Out just because it's not super targeted removal. And I like every other card like a lot more. So this is how we're going to sideboard against Gruul Prowess. The fourth most popular deck is Jeskai Aggro, Jeskai Convoke, whatever you want to call it. We're bringing in a Cut Down. We're bringing in Harvester of Misery, maybe. There we go. There's an argument for artifact and enchantment hate, but I don't really like it. So we're going to bring out a Terra Sunder, bring out The End. We're kind of treating this similar to the Gruul Aggro deck. I'm going to bring out the Thruns. And taking out a Blot Out, I think, is totally fine. So that's how we're going to sideboard against the Jeskai Convoke deck. The fifth most popular deck is the Domain deck. Against Domain, we are bringing in the Duresses. They have a lot of scary non-creature spells. Bringing in The End to take out their threats, which is, again, very scary. Terra Sunder and Tranquil Throwback are good for artifact and enchantment hate, and similar with Nissa, artifact and enchantment hate, but it's also a finisher. Gonna be bringing out these Gix Command, really does nothing. Anoint with Affliction really does nothing. Cut Down really does nothing. And we aren't really looking to go long. We're looking to answer what they have going on and just beating them. So I like taking out the Preacher of the Schisms. Glissa's better here because of the artifact and enchantment hate when Glissa connects. So this is how I sideboard against Domain. The 6th most popular deck is the Mono Red Prowess deck. We're going to be sideboarding the same against Mono Red Prowess as we duel against Gruul. So just as a reminder, this is what what it looks like. So there you go. The 7th most popular deck is the Azorius Convoke deck. We're going to be sideboarding the same as against Jeskai Convoke. Again, here's a reminder what it looks like. There you go. The 8th most popular deck is Boros Mice. Against Boros Mice, we're going to be sideboarding the same as the aggressive decks. Again, here is a reminder of what it looks like. Though Boros Mice has a lot more of enchantments, so Tranquil Throwback is actually better, which is pretty cool. There you go. The 9th most popular deck is the Temur Floodcaller combo. Against this deck, we're bringing in Duresses. I'm a fan of the end because they don't have a lot of creatures to actually kill us with. Terra Sunder and Tranquil Flowback are good for like Storm Chaser's talent and whatnot. So we can take out the cut downs because they can get our creatures a little too big. And I think we just want to be defeating them literally as fast as possible. So we're going to take out some of these expensive spells. Just shave on a Shieldred. I think that's totally fine. So sorry, sideboard against Temur Floodcaller combo. And then the 10th most popular deck is the Mono White Token Control deck. We're going to bring in Duress. They have mostly non-creature spells. Being able to selectively take those out feels really good. Harvester of Misery is totally solid, destroying all of the tokens, getting things out of the way. They also play a ton of enchantments, so we want our enchantment hate and finishers. Honestly, I'm also a fan of the end, like being able to take these cards out. Bringing out Gix's Command, and then we're going to be bringing actually we want Annoy with Affliction. We're going to be bringing out most of these removal spells that just really don't do anything. You can take out Blot Out as well. And then while it's important to get like a really fast start, the games are often going to go long, and so Llanowar Elves is just an awful top deck, and I'd rather have all my top decks be insane. So that's how I'm going to sideboard against Mono White Token Control. This is blue-white control. As far as the sideboard goes, we have Devout Decree for red or black permanents. Rest in peace for Graveyard Hate. Beza catches us up in a lot of different situations, whether it be super slow decks or like the fast decks or anything like that. Overlord of the Mistmores is great against these mid-range decks, just really hard to answer threat. Negate for problematic non-creature spells. Tishana's Tidebinder for decks with a lot of enter the battlefield effects. Mostly is that. Wiltly Fleege and Obstinate Baloth are counters to Hopeless Nightmare. And Dissection Tools is good against any deck that we need additional threats or a lifelink creature for aggro decks. That being said, the most popular deck in Standard is Gruul Aggro, and we're actually going to be sideboarding the same against Gruul Prowess and Mono Red. We're going to be bringing in these Devout Decree, Beza to help catch us up, and Dissection Tools just as a life linker. Going to be siding out of Negate because the creatures are the thing that we're really focused on and actually care about, and the Overlords because it's just a lot of mana. To just lose to a Monstrous Rage is just not fair. So this is how I'm going to sideboard against the red base aggro decks. The second most popular deck is the Esper Self Bounce. We're actually going to sideboard the same against Dimir Self Bounce as well, which is the 7th most popular deck. Against the two bounce decks, I'm a fan of Negate. Countering this town ain't big enough is just a very big deal. Overlord is very good because it's really hard for them to answer it, as well as Obstinate Baloth and Wiltly Fleege as counters to Hopeless Nightmare, and Tishana's Tidebinder because it's effectively a counter to like a lot of different things. That being said, we're going to cut down on these Jace Perfected Mind. We really don't need these Bezas. I'm not a fan of the Hornlock Whale because the Lagoon Breach isn't that good when there's a lot of enter the battlefield effects that we are really afraid of. I'm just going to shave on a stock up, and this time I'm going to sideboard against the self-bounce decks. The third most popular deck in Standard is Domain. We're actually going to be sideboarding the same against the 4-color Zur deck, which is the 8th most popular deck as well. Against this deck, Negate is excellent, as well as Tishana's Tidebinder. And we'll be siding out of Temp Lockdown, and we want to bring in the Overlords just as many threats as possible. And we're just going to shave on a Beza. It doesn't do much against this deck. This is how I'm going to sideboard against the Domain decks. The fourth most popular deck is Dimir Midrange. We're actually going to be sideboarding the same against Dimir and Golgari. So against the mid-range decks, we're bringing in the Devout Decree. Overlord is absolutely insane against both of these decks. And we're just going to shave on these Bezas, and this is how I'm going to sideboard against the mid-range decks. So I talked about Golgari mid-range is 5th. Gruul Prowess, which is 6th, we've already talked about. Dimir Self Bounce is 7th, we've already talked about. 4-color Zur is 8th, which we've already talked about. Mono Red Prowess is 9th, which brings us all the way to Jeskai Oculus. Against the Oculus deck, we are bringing in the Rest in Peace Eyes, as well as Negate. I'm also a fan of Tishana's Tidebinder because it can neuter a lot out of the opponent's deck. And we're going to be shaving on cutting, these temporary lockdowns. Hornlock Whale doesn't do much. I don't want to return things to hand. And Beza just isn't really doing anything, which means we have a slot for one more thing, so we're just going to bring in the Overlord. So that's how I'm going to sideboard against the Jeskai Oculus deck. So this is Jeskai Oculus. As far as the sideboard goes, we're playing 3 Destroy Evil, mostly as enchantment hate, but also really good against big flyers that can stop us, like other Oculuses or Haughty Djinn or things like that. Negate is for non-creature spells that may be relevant. Pyroclasm and Brotherhood's End are both decent board wipes against the aggro decks. Brotherhood's End costing 1 more mana, but killing more things, and also having that artifact kind of side synergy. It's not synergy, just utility. We're playing 3 Chandra Spark Hunter as a planeswalker for these decks that might go very, very long and we need additional threats. Ghost Vacuum as our graveyard hate, and then Filigree Xylex against decks that may be going wide with a lot of permanents that cost very little. Now, the most popular deck in Standard is Esper Self Bounce. Against this deck, we are bringing in Negate if we can stop this townie big enough. That is just so powerful. I like Filigree Xylex as well because a lot of their enchantments and creatures and stuff cost 1 mana, and it, in that sense, effectively wiping the board is pretty cool. I'm taking out my bounce things. Hold on, I guess I can make this a little bit smaller. Taking my bounce stuff, everything has beneficial end of the battlefield effects, so it's just not realistic. And some Bitter Reunion, because that's just like an easy flex slot, and that's how we're going to sideboard against the Esper bounce deck. The second most popular deck is the Gruul aggro deck. We're going to sideboard the same against them as Mono Red Prowess and Gruul Prowess, which is the 3rd and 5th most popular decks, respectively. Against these aggressive decks, we're bringing in the Pyroclasms, we're bringing in the Brotherhood's End. I like Filigree Xylex as well. I like Spell Pierce, but not Negate, so that's like really relevant. And we're bringing out some of these cards that may not do a lot immediately and aren't a part of our nut hands. Prophet's Eidetic Memory and Bitter Reunion don't do a lot immediately, so I like just siding those out and keeping mostly action in our deck. So this is how I sideboard against those red aggressive decks. 3rd most popular deck we've already talked about is Mono Red. The 4th most popular deck is 4-color Zur. We're going to sideboard the same against 4-color Zur as we do Domain, which is the 7th most popular deck. We bring in the Destroy Evils. It kills Zur, kills all the enchantments that were very scary. Negate, things like Leyline Binding and board wipes can be pretty good against us. And Chandra, because they are looking to go very long, and we need permanents that may be a little difficult to answer. Torch a Tower gets rid of absolutely nothing. And I'm not a fan of the bounce spells. The things we'd want to bounce are instant speed, and the things we don't want to bounce are like have insane end of the battlefield effects, so it's just, there's really no point. And we're going to bring out some Bitter Reunion. Again, this is the flex slot, so that's how I have a sideboard against 4-color Zur and Domain. The 5th most popular deck we've already talked about is Gruul Prowess. The 6th most popular deck is Dimir Midrange. We're bringing in Ghost Vacuum. It's pretty nice to kind of snipe that Enduring Curiosity, and there's a lot of really good creatures that we wouldn't mind having as a 1/1. I'm also a reasonably big fan of Pyroclasm in this matchup, being able to take out the Deep Cavern Bats and stuff like that, and then Negate, because they just have so many non-creature spells that are just very good against us. And we're just going to be siding out some of this chaff. Unfortunately, the bounces aren't very good against this deck as well, because there's a lot of end of the battlefield effects that are very scary. Side note, Prophet's Eidetic Memory, and that's how I'm going to sideboard against Dimir Midrange. We've already talked about the 7th most popular deck, which is Domain, which brings us to the 8th most popular deck, which is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari, we're bringing in the Destroy Evils. There's a lot of things with toughness 4 or greater, and then plus some versions of the deck are still in the demon package, and it's nice destroying that enchantment. The big thing I want to be taking out is Torch the Tower. That's really the only card in the main deck that I really hate. So just to fill that 4th slot, we're bringing in the Negate, and we're calling it good there. That's how I sideboard against Golgari Midrange. The 9th most popular deck is Azorius Control, Blue-White Control. Obviously, we're bringing in the Negates. We are bringing in the Chandras. Being able to just have like additional threats is awesome. And obviously, we're going to be siding out. I can't do it. Magic Online. There we go. Torch the Tower. And we'll be siding out of a bounce off. That's how I'm going to sideboard against Blue-White Control. Then the 10th most popular deck is the Mirror Match. In the Mirror Match, we kind of need to bring in the Destroy Evils just to make sure they can't nut out on us with the Oculus. Similar thing with Ghost Vacuum. I don't like Negate because often it's tempo negative. So this is the cards I'm bringing in. I'm going to shave on the flex slots in this deck. I really don't like the bounce thing, so we're just going to just take that out. This on a sideboard against Jeskai Oculus, the mirror match. So this is Demir's self bounce. As far as the sideboard goes, negate is for decks that have non-creature spells that we care about. Get out is for decks that have creatures and enchantments that we care about. Tishana's Tidebinder for triggered abilities that we care about, mostly for like temporary lockdown and stuff like that. Cut down for the aggro decks. Dress, we're going to side in against similar decks as we do negate, tear up the non-creature spell hand. Preacher of the Schism and Shieldred exist together when we need to transform into a mid-range deck. We have just too many cards to take out. We just need to bring in value. And then Gix Command is a board wipe and a just game ender against the aggro decks. Now the most popular deck in Standard is Esper Self Bounce. Against Esper Self Bounce, we are bringing in the negates. We are bringing in Duress. I also like Get Out against this deck. You know, counters almost everything. And then the plan in this matchup is just to be better at doing the thing. And so I'm going to bring out this removal. We're going to focus on this Nowhere to Run removal. And we're just going to shave on some Spyglass Sirens. And this is how I sideboard against Esper. And it's also how I'm going to sideboard in the mirror match, which is the third most popular deck. The second most popular deck is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari Midrange, we are bringing in those mid-range cards just so we can sort of keep up a little bit. We're going to be taking out our cut downs because it doesn't really kill anything besides Llanowar Elves, at least properly kill anything besides Llanowar Elves. We're going to shave a Hopeless Nightmare because often they sideboard into an Obstinate Baloth, and that's really scary. And then we're going to shave a Nowhere to Run, and this is how I sideboard against Golgari. We already talked about Dimir Bounce, which is the third most popular deck, so we'll talk about Gruul Aggro, which is the fourth most popular deck. We're going to sideboard the same against Gruul Aggro as we do against Gruul Prowess and Mono Red, or all these red base aggro decks are going to sideboard the same. We're going to bring in our cut downs. We're going to bring in Preacher of the Schism because it's a great blocker, and Shieldred because it's a great blocker, and we're going to bring in Gix's Command. And we'll be sideboarding out a lot of these cards that need help and just like aren't removal, like Hopeless Nightmare, Enduring Innocence, and then we're going to be shaving on Kaido. I like everything else, so this is how I sideboard against those three red decks. The fifth most popular deck is Dimir Midrange. Against Dimir Midrange, I actually do like the cut downs, being able to take out the Fairy Masterminds and things like that. I think is really powerful. Also like Shieldred, really funny against Enduring Curiosity. Tishana's Tidebinder, also very good against Enduring Curiosity. In fact, making it textless and then killing it is really hilarious. That being said, we're really going to focus on doing our thing. We're going to shave on Hopeless Nightmare, shave on Enduring Curiosity, and a Spyglass Siren. That's how I'm going to sideboard against Dimir Midrange. Before I talked about Gruul Prowess, the sixth most popular deck. So the seventh most popular deck is Azorius Tempo, which is like the Oculus Reanimator Haughty Jin deck. Against this deck, Negate is very, very powerful. So is Duress. And that's really all I'm interested in sideboarding in. And we kind of have to take out Nowhere to Run because it doesn't really kill anything. Unfortunately, also Cut Down doesn't really take out anything. So we need to find other cards to bring in. Shieldred's decent. Preacher of the Schism's a good value card. That's how I'm going to sideboard against the Azorius Tempo deck. The eighth most popular deck is Jeskai Convoke. Against Jeskai Convoke, I'm a fan of Get Out. It counters Shelter by Ghost if they keep that in, Case the Gateway Express, and all of the creatures. Just really, really good. Cut Down's really good to sort of keep them off of comboing really hard. Gix's Command as an awesome board wipe. And Tishana's Tidebinder is actually pretty funny against this deck as well. And we're going to sideboard out of the cards that need help because you really have to respect our opponent's deck as an aggro deck. And so that's how I'm going to sideboard against Jeskai Convoke. We've already talked about Mono Red, which is the ninth most popular deck. So the 10th most popular deck is Mono White Caretaker. Against this deck, we're bringing in Get Out, being able to counter the Caretaker's talent and all the creatures. That's really powerful. Negate counters basically everything else. Duress, taking those things out. Tishana's Tidebinder, stopping those triggered abilities. I think Shieldred is very good against this deck because they draw so many cards. We're going to be bringing out our Nowhere to Runs. We're going to be bringing out our Cut Downs. If I can do it right. There we go. And they're going to be shaving on Floodpit's Drowner. They don't have a lot of creatures, and so that's how I'm going to sideboard against Mono White Caretaker. So as far as the sideboard goes, Exercise, we like against, you know, great artifact, enchantment hate, good against the enduring creatures, great against domain, etc., etc. Especially against decks that are sided in Rest in Peace against us. Same thing with Get Lost, but it's also pretty good against creatures that are going to hit us pretty hard. Grand Abolisher is a 2-mana 2/2. During your turn, opponent can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifact creatures or enchantments. This is very much our answer to things like counter magic. Temporary Lockdown, we're playing for these aggressive decks. Also, it's a fine answer to Rest in Peace. Minor Misstep, another great answer to the aggressive decks. Negate, we're going to be grabbing with Invasion to stop board wipes when we like combo and stuff like that. But mostly it's just to be able to fight on the stack a little bit. And then Unnerving Grasp, return to one on-land permanent to its owner's hand, Manifest Dread. It's just another way to answer those problematic permanents that interrupt our combo, and we are never siding in Season of Weaving because we're just going to be grabbing it from our sideboard with the Invasion. That being said, the most popular deck is Gruul Aggro, the 6th most popular deck is Gruul Prowess, and the 8th most popular deck is Mono Red Prowess, and we're going to sideboard the same against all of them. We're going to be bringing in our Get Lost just as additional removal, the temporary lockdowns, and the minor missteps. We're just trying to stop what they're doing as fast as possible. We're going to side out of these expensive cards. Confounding Riddle is basically like the big expense. We like Affairs Dispersal because it slows our opponents down. That being said, we're just going to side out of a single Moment of Truth, a single Charter Course. I'm not sure which one's better or worse, but this is how I'm going to sideboard against those red base aggressive decks. The second most popular deck is Esper Self Bounce. We're also going to sideboard the same against Dimir Self Bounce, which is the 5th most popular deck. Against this deck, they have Rest in Peace, which is really bad for us. So we're going to bring in Exercise and Get Lost to deal with that. They also can interrupt our combo partway through it. So to stop that, we're going to be siding in these Grand Abolishers, as well as these Negates. And Temp Lockdown is pretty good at shutting just everything down. That being said, not a big fan of these 3-mana spells. We want to stay as low to the ground as possible. And then we're just going to shave on Moment of Truth and Charter Course, and that's how I'm going to sideboard against Esper Pixie and Dimir Pixie. The third most popular deck is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari Midrange, I am a pretty big fan of Get Lost, being able to deal with those problematic creatures. And then we're going to trade it off for a slightly worse version of that. This time I'm going to sideboard against Golgari. The fourth most popular deck is Domain. Against Domain, we're loving this enchantment hate. We have to be really, really aware of Rest in Peace. In addition, they often have ways to like interrupt us, so Grand Abolisher is pretty okay, as well as, excuse me, Negate. That being said, we're probably going to combo before they actually start attacking. So we're going to sideboard out of these Dispersals, and then generally just shave on these Charter Course and Moment of Truths, and that's how I'm going to sideboard against Domain. We've already talked about the 5th most popular deck, which is Dimir Self Bounce. We've already talked about the 6th most popular deck, which is Gruul Prowess. So the 7th most popular deck is Dimir Midrange. Against Dimir Midrange, we're a fan of Get Lost. I'm a fan of Unnerving Grasp, being able to return like the bat, the turn you're going to combo or whatever, seems pretty powerful. And then we're going to bring in some minor missteps because they just really flood up on the duresses and like Ghost Vacuum and things like that. That being said, Grand Abolisher is pretty powerful because of the Ghost Vacuum. Going to be siding out of the Ifara's Dispersal and then shaving on the Confounding Riddle, just because like staying as far low to the ground as possible is really important. So I'm going to sideboard against Dimir Midrange. We've already talked about the 8th most popular deck, which is Mono Red Prowess. The 9th most popular deck is the Vorcolor Zur deck, which is just a slightly different version of Domain, which brings us to the 10th most popular deck, which is Jeskai Convoke. Against the Jeskai Convoke deck, obviously Temporary Lockdown is excellent. Also have to bring in Grand Abolisher for Protect the Negotiators, Exercise, and Get Lost for the Rest in Pieces. And we're just going to be siding out of Confounding Riddle. Unfortunately, they're attacking, so we really like the Ifara's Dispersal. And so we're just going to bring out the Moment of Truths and just a single Charter Course, and that's how I'm going to sideboard against Convoke. So this is a Jeskai Convoke deck, and let's look at the sideboard. Destroy Evil is 4 creatures with toughness 4 or greater. I'm thinking like Demons or Shieldred, but also really good against enchantments. Split Up, we're playing mostly for other aggressive decks that are going to be have tapped creatures against us, or the mirror match if they're convoking. It can kind of get people. It's pretty awesome. We're playing 2 Disdainful Stroke for these Domain decks or board wipes or things like that. We're playing 4 Protect the Negotiators, mostly to protect ourselves against board wipes. Or if you know the opponent's deck has cards that are just insane against us. We have to remember these 4 Protect the Negotiators kind of dilutes our primary game plan, so it's really important to understand that if we're bringing that card in, it needs to be for like a really good reason. Lithomantic Barrage, mostly for the Dimir and the white deck, but it's just like a solid card, decent in the mirror match too. And then we're playing Torch the Tower for these aggressive decks, but also really good against the enduring cards because it exiles and makes it so they can't come back. So the most popular deck in Standard is Dimir Midrange. Against Dimir Midrange, we are bringing in Lithomantic Barrage. We are bringing in Torch the Tower. The cool part about Torch the Tower, specifically in this deck too, is that we have a lot of artifacts to bargain. So we can deal 3 damage really, really often. So we can deal Enduring Curiosity reasonably easily. So the big thing here is I'm not a giant fan of Sheltered by Ghosts because they run a reasonable amount of removal. They have to tap out to do it, but like it'd be kind of devastating if we Sheltered by Ghost something. And then we're just going to bring out 2 Clockwork Percussionists because it's sort of the flex slot in the deck. This is how I sideboard against Dimir. The second most popular deck is the Golgari mid-range deck. Against Golgari mid-range, we're bringing in Destroy Evils so that we can get rid of those really big blockers like either Demon or Shieldred. And then we're really looking at cards in our main deck that we don't want in our deck. And really the only card is Sheltered by Ghosts. Just because they have a bunch of removal, we just can't afford to use that card. So then I kind of alternate between Torch the Tower and Protect the Negotiators. The to Protect the Negotiators is solid if you're really worried about Harvester of Misery, where Torch the Tower is really good if you want to get rid of these cheap creatures that are looking to block you. I think going 1-1 is totally fine, but so this is how I sideboard against Golgari midrange. The third most popular deck is Gruul Prowess, and we're going to be sideboarding the same as this deck. Again, the Mono Red Prowess deck, which is the 6th most popular deck, and the Boros Mice deck, which is the 8th most popular deck. So this is for all of those 3 decks. Against those decks, we're bringing in Split Up because they're going to be attacking a bunch and we can kind of get them. We're bringing in Torch the Tower as that creature removal. And then we're going to be bringing out some of these weaker creatures. Sheltered by Ghosts is disgusting because it gives lifelink. I think Resolute Reinforcements is probably our worst card besides that. So we're going to shave on that. And this is how I sideboard against those 3 red decks. The 4th most popular deck is Jeskai Convoke / Aggro, the Mirror Match. It's also good against the Azorius Convoke deck, so we're going to be sideboarding similarly with both. I'm a fan of bringing in Split Up because you can kind of get them after they do their Convoke stuff. Lithomantic Barrage is solid. Torch the Tower is pretty good. I don't think Sheltered by Ghosts is super worth it because there's plenty of removal and we're looking for cheaper removal or literal board wipes. And then we're going to shave on our flex slots. That's how I sideboard in the Mirror Match and against Azorius Convoke. The 5th most popular deck is Domain. Against Domain, we're bringing in these Destroy Evils. We're bringing in these Disdainful Strokes. We're bringing in Protect the Negotiators because they have board wipes. It is big boy scary. They have plenty of removal, especially board wipes, so Sheltered by Ghosts just kind of does nothing. We're going to shave on some flex slots as well. Whoops. And so that's how I sideboard against Domain. Now we already know how to sideboard against the 6th most popular deck because it's Mono Red Prowess. We already know how to sideboard against the 7th most popular deck being Azorius Convoke. We talked about that when we talked about Jeskai. We know how to sideboard against the 8th most popular deck, Boros Mice. And so the 9th most popular deck is the Temur Floodcaller combo. Against Temur Floodcaller, Destroy Evil's solid. It can take out some creatures sometimes, but mostly being able to take out those enchantments we're super duper worried about. Lithomantic Barrage takes out most of the creatures. And I'm a fan of Torch the Tower against nearly all of the creatures as well. I like Sheltered by Ghosts as a removal spell against this deck because it's really important we remove the creatures in general, and they don't have a ton of removal themselves. So we just kind of are going to bring out our flex slots. And then because we're bringing out so many creatures and not bringing in any, we're going to shave on these payoffs as well. So this is how I sideboard against the Temur Floodcaller combo. And then the 10th most popular deck is the Mono White Control deck. Mono White tokens, whatever you want to call it. We're going to be bringing out Destroy Evil. They have a bunch of really scary enchantments, also Beza and that stuff. We're bringing in Disdainful Stroke for big, scary, like board wipes, Sunfall, all that stuff. Same thing with Protect the Negotiators. And then we got to take out this removal. Removal just generally isn't that good unless it's like very cheap and always gets rid of the stuff. And so this is sideboard against Mono White.
So this is the Black-White Bounce deck. If you wanted to check out the deck overall, you should totally check it out on the channel. I did deck tech earlier today. We're just going to focus primarily on the sideboard. Now, as far as the sideboard goes, Rest in Peace is our Graveyard Hate, Lord of the Third Path, Artifact and Enchantment Hate. Enduring Innocence is great against decks that we need to make sure we draw a lot of cards and we can go really long with. Beza is mostly for aggro, but is really good at catching up in any capacity. Cut down for the aggro decks. And then Tiny Bones fulfills a similar role as Enduring Innocence. It allows us to kind of keep up and do some card advantage-y things with decks that are going to go pretty long. Now, as far as sideboarding goes, the most popular deck in Standard is Esper Self Bounce. Now, we're also going to be sideboarding the same against Dimir Self Bounce, which is the 7th most popular deck. Now, against this deck, I'm going to bring in Tiny Bones, and we're going to take out Lauren. I don't really care about the Artifact and Enchantment Hate. And that being said, Liliana is kind of medium as well. Oops, put that in the wrong pile. Liliana is kind of medium as well, so we're going to bring in the Enduring Innocence. So this allows us to keep up with, frankly, their better bounce plan, and takes out some of the cards that are pretty medium as well. So this time I'm going to sideboard against Esper and Dimir bounce. Also kind of cool with Tiny Bones that you can like take their this tiny big enough and like do crazy stuff with our deck. The second most popular deck is Gruul Aggro. We're also going to be sideboarding the same against Gruul Prowess and Mono Red Prowess. Going to be bringing in these cut downs and the Bezas. We'll be bringing out the Lorens. It's just too expensive. Similar thing with Unholy Annex. And we would kind of like to bring out the Lilianas as well. So, I mean, Enduring Innocence is lifelink, so it's probably a little bit better than Liliana. And so we'll just keep one in. So this time I'm going to sideboard against the red decks. The third most popular deck is Domain. We're going to sideboard the same against 4-color Zur. We're bringing in the Lorens, bringing in the Tiny Bones, and bringing in Enduring Innocence. Temporary Lockdown is hitting the bin, as well as Nowhere to Run and Grimbauble. We have one card too many, so Beza is just like totally fine. So that's how I'm going to sideboard against Domain and the 4-color Zur deck. The fourth most popular deck is Dimir Midrange. We're actually going to sideboard the same against Golgari Midrange as well. And it's mostly these card advantage-y cards that we care about. So Enduring Innocence, Tiny Bones. These are the cards that are really, really good. We're going to be taking out the temporary lockdowns. Those are the only things that are like actively bad. And then Tiny Bones joins up is totally fine to take out. So it's on my sideboard against those mid-range decks. So the fifth most popular deck is Golgari Midrange, we've already talked about. The sixth most popular deck is Gruul Prowess, we've already talked about. The seventh most popular deck, Dimir Self-Bounce, we've already talked about. The eighth most popular deck, 4-color Zur, we've already talked about. The ninth most popular deck is Mono Red Prowess, we've already talked about. Which brings us to the 10th most popular deck, which is Jeskai Oculus. We'll be bringing in the Rest in Pieces, and we'll be taking out the Grimbaubles, and we also need to take out the temporary lockdown, so we need to find a little bit, whoops. I got rid of temporary lockdown, whoops. Which means we need to find a few more cards to put in. Beza is always totally fine, and I'm a fan of Enduring Innocence just to keep up a little bit, so this is how I'm going to sideboard against the Jeskai Oculus deck.
So this is the Golgari Graveyard deck. As far as the sideboard goes, we are playing one Cut Down. In an attempt to beat the aggressive decks. Duress for decks that Duress is playing against. Starving Revenant, very, very good against decks where life total doesn't matter, so you can get that card advantage. Terror Tide is a board wipe of choice. Harvester of Misery, kind of a board wipe of choice, but mostly just for these aggressive decks. Scrap Shooter is an excellent blocker for 3 mana, but also great artifact and enchantment hate. Obstinate Baloth is decent against aggressive decks, but also our way to beat the Hopeless Nightmare self-bounce decks. And then Haywire Might, great artifact and enchantment hate as well. And the most popular deck in Standard is Gruul Aggro. We're also going to sideboard the same against Gruul Prowess and Mono Red Prowess, which is the 7th and 9th most popular decks. We're going to be bringing in the Cut Downs, the Terror Tides, again, wiping the board, destroying the creatures, that's the name of the game, the Obstinate Baloths, and there's an argument for Scrap Shooter. I don't really like it, but we're going to be bringing out some of these flex slots, the Chichen Gravestalker. We're bringing out Up the Beanstalk because we are not looking to play the long game. And then a single Hollow Marauder just because it's pretty bad at blocking. That's how I'm going to sideboard against those red aggressive decks. The second most popular deck is Esper Self-Bounce. We're also going to sideboard the same against Dimir Self-Bounce, which is the 6th most popular deck. We're going to be bringing in the Duress. Hitting that this tiny big enough is pretty relevant. I'm a fan of Scrap Shooter just because it blocks pretty much everything in the deck like very, very well. And then Obstinate Baloth for those Hopeless Nightmares. Bringing out the Harvester of Misery. Again, Harvester of Misery is mostly for the aggressive decks. Chichen Gravestalker is always a fine cut just because it's the flex slot. Shaven and Overwhelming Remorse is totally fine just because we're not trying to win this game on removal. We're trying to win this game on just kind of overwhelming our opponents. And actually, speaking of, I'm okay with taking out the other two. So this is how I'm going to sideboard against the bounce decks. The third most popular deck in Standard is Domain. Against Domain, we're bringing in that Duress. Bringing in the Starving Revenant because life total just doesn't matter. Scrap Shooter is excellent for that enchantment hate, which is oh so good against Domain. And then the 2 Haywire Mites for the same reason. Bring out the Harvesters. We'll bring out the Gravestalker. And we're going to bring out a combination of Sea-Note Scout and Gnawing Vermin. The dying effect from Gnawing Vermin doesn't matter. So, like, really, we're just playing it for the mill. This is how I'm going to sideboard against Domain. The fourth most popular deck is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari Midrange, we mostly just want Harvester of Misery kind of out of the deck. Which, actually, I'm going to be sideboarding the same against Dimir Midrange as well. So, I guess this is for both of them. And Starving Revenant is really the only card that I'm like, I want this card in my deck. or whatever. So we're looking for kind of another card to bring in. I think Scrap Shooter's totally fine because it hits artifact and enchantments in both decks. And then blocks really well. So that's why I'm just going to sideboard against the 2 mid-range decks. We've already talked about the 6th most popular deck, which is Dimir Self-Bounce. We've already talked about the 7th most popular deck, which is the Grow Prowess deck. 4-color Zur is the 8th most popular deck. We're going to sideboard the same as we do against Domain. The 9th most popular deck is the Mono Red Prowess, which brings us to Jeskai Oculus as the 10th most popular deck. Against Jeskai Oculus, we're loving the Duress. Cut Down's also pretty good because it hits most of the cards in the deck, just not Oculus. And we're bringing out the Harvester of Misery, and that's just how I like sideboarding against the Oculus deck. This is the Boros Mice deck, and let's talk about these sideboard cards. Destroy Evil is our enchantment hate, also decent against cards like Shieldred and stuff like that. Lithamanic Barrage, great against blue and white decks, frankly. Torch the Tower is good against our aggro decks, also really, really good against the enduring cards and Emberheart Challenger and stuff like that. Screaming Nemesis is what we want against decks that are looking to block us. Witchstalker Frenzy, again, great against decks that are looking to block. And then Sunspine Lynx is against decks that are greedy with their mana or are looking to gain life, really. The most popular deck in Standard is Esper Self-Bounce. Against this deck, we're going to be setting in our Lithamanic Barrages, our Sunspine Lynxes, and I'm a fan of Torch the Tower as well. There's an argument for Destroy Evil just so they can't bounce their enchantments, but I think that's just interacting too much, and we should just be trying to defeat our opponent as fast as possible. Gonna be siding out of Screaming Nemesis. It's just a lot of mana to keep bouncing back to our hand, and they really aren't looking to block our creatures per se. Gonna be siding out of Shelter by Ghosts. It's just too easy for them to answer, and we're gonna be siding out of Mabel just because we can't really rely on too many synergies. Mabel's 3 mana, so a similar reason to Screaming Nemesis, and I'm just trying to defeat them as literally fast as possible. So this is how I'm gonna sideboard against Esper Pixie. The second most popular deck is the Gruul aggro deck. Against Gruul aggro, Torch the Tower is excellent. Screaming Nemesis is really good because they're looking to block, or really lets us block super profitably. And then Witchstalker Frenzy is good because it rewards us for continuing to attack. We're going to sideboard out of our Hired Claw. Really focusing on these synergies with Manifold Mouse and whatnot. Mabel is just a lot of mana for something that is not super-duper fast, which we need to be super-duper fast against this deck. I'm gonna side out of some Firepush Swordmaster. They have a lot of removal, so going really wide is a little unrealistic, but we're keeping some in. So this is how I sideboard against Gruul. Against Dimir Self-Bounce, we're bringing in these Lithamanic Barrages, the Torch the Towers, and then we're bringing out the Sheltered by Ghosts just because they can so easily answer this stuff, especially with nowhere to run in their deck. But this is how I sideboard against Dimir Self-Bounce. The fourth most popular deck is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari, we're bringing in these Destroy Evils because it answers Preacher of the Schism, Sentinel, Shieldred, the Demon if they play it. Just answers so many cards in the deck. Similarly, I like Witchstalker Frenzy to get that stuff out of the way. Now, there's a few cards we kind of have to bring out because they're bad. Sheltered by Ghosts is just too bad because they can answer it so easily. And Monstrous Rage, they can like kill in response super easily as well. So while we want to bring out Screaming Nemesis, we kind of have to bring 2 more in just as more threats because these cards have to come out. And so this is how I'm going to sideboard against Golgari. The fifth most popular deck is Dimir Midrange. Against Dimir Mid, we're bringing in Torch the Towers. Answering Enduring Curiosity, I think, is super important still. Witchstalker Frenzy is really solid as well. Destroy Evil could be good if something like Oil Deep Gearhulk becomes really popular. I'm not quite sure yet, so I'm not going to bring it in. We're bringing out these Screaming Nemesis and a few Sheltered by Ghosts, and that's how I'm going to sideboard against Dimir. The sixth most popular deck is the Gruul Prowess deck. We're going to sideboard the same as we did against Gruul Aggro. They're really similar. The Gruul Prowess deck just leans a little bit heavier on like Slickshot Show Off and Questing Druid and stuff. The seventh most popular deck is Domain. Against Domain, Destroy Evil is insane. They have a ton of enchantments and creatures that we can take out with Destroy Evil. Similar to Witchstalker Frenzy, and Sunspine Lynx is built for beating Domain, to be totally real. Bringing out Screaming Nemesis just because they have too many answers. Similar with Sheltered by Ghosts. Lightning Helix doesn't really do much, and then we're going to shave on Burst Lightning because, again, besides Burning Face, doesn't really do much. But this is how I'm going to sideboard against the Zur Domain deck. The eighth most popular deck is Jeskai Convoke. Against Jeskai Convoke, we love these Lithamanic Barrages. We love Torch the Tower. We love Screaming Nemesis because it makes things just very, very hard to block. And we're going to be siding out of the Shard Mage's Rescue because they don't have a ton of removal. Post-board, they bring in 4 Torch the Tower, which is a lot, but I'm not a big fan of Shard Mage's Rescue. I just want to be playing my creatures as fast as possible. Going to shave on some Hired Claw, and then we're going to shave 1 Mabel, since I'm a sideboard against Jeskai Convoke. Against Mono Red, we're going to sideboard the same as we did against Gruul, the Gruul variants as well, which is the 9th most popular deck. And then the 10th most popular deck is Azorius Tempo, the Azorius Oculus deck. Destroy Evil is just nuts against this deck. Maybe. Magic Online. You can do it. There we go. All right. Destroy Evil is just nuts against this deck. Same thing with Lithomanic Barrage. And I'm actually a fan of Screaming Nemesis because their things are so big, it's just so awkward for them to block. That being said, Lightning Helix does effectively nothing. We're going to shave on Hired Claw. That's our flex slot. Burst Lightning eliminates nothing unless we just spend 1 million mana on it to take out a Hottie so I'm going to sideboard against Azorius Oculus. So this is the mono white caretaker deck, mono white token control, whatever you would like to call it. As far as the sideboard goes, Authority of the Consuls for these aggressive red decks. Also Smite, also for aggressive red decks, but very good against enduring cards because it exiles. Exercise, Enchantment Hate, again, also very good against the enduring cards. Rest in Peace as our graveyard hate. Split Up as a one-sided board wipe. And Stone Brain against decks that rely on very specific cards that happen to be good against us. So, the most popular deck is Dimir Midrange. Against Dimir Midrange, I'm a fan of Elspeth's Smite. Being able to deal with our creatures and make sure they never hit us is a very important aspect of the deck. Also a fan of Split Up. Also, I like Exercise, mostly because the way they win is drawing more cards than us, and Exercise deals with Enduring Curiosity. We're going to be cutting Archangel Elspeth because it doesn't really do anything. We're going to be cutting Beza just because it doesn't really create anything that can block properly, so I'm not a giant fan of that. Then we're going to shave on Sunfall. They can bring in Negates, and it becomes very scary to just tap out for 5 mana, and we're going to rely a little bit heavier on Split Up, and so this high sideboard against Dimir Midrange. The second most popular deck is Esper Self Bounce. Against this deck, we are bringing in Split Up to be able to deal with our creatures. I'm a fan of Stone Brain because if we're able to take this town ain't big enough from our opponent's deck, it ends up being very powerful.
Ribbon for me.
What did you want?
Ribbon for me.
Yeah.
Dance.
Yeah.
Baby, it me I'm dance. Me.
You want to go to Grammy Dawn's?
Yep.
You do?
I born.
You like Grammy Dawn?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we talk about this after I'm done talking about Mono White?
Yeah.
Okay. Other than that, we just kind of have to play the deck the way it's sort of meant to be played. I'm not a fan of Sunfall because like they can tempo us out so well, and they sideboard into counter magic, and other than that, like I think this deck is just like powerful on its own. So this is how we're gonna sideboard against Esper. The third most popular deck is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari, I like just running it back. I think the deck's great against the Golgari deck. I just want to play this 75. The fourth most popular deck is the Gruul Aggro deck. But also the fifth most popular deck is Gruul Prowess, and the eighth most popular deck is Mono Red. We're going to sideboard the same against all of those. We're going to bring in the Authority of the Consuls. We're going to bring in Elspeth's Smite and the Split Up. We're going to be sideboarding out of basically everything that takes some work. I'm not a fan of Caretaker's Talent because it doesn't do anything the turn we play it. We want everything to sort of stop the aggro. And then we're going to shave on Sunfall just because it's 5 mana. That's a lot of mana. We're bringing in Split Up anyway. But this is how I sideboard against Gruul Aggro, Gruul Prowess, and Mono Red Prowess. That brings us to the sixth most popular deck, Azorius Tempo. Against the Azorius Tempo deck, we are bringing in Rest in Peace, so they're unable to reanimate their creatures, but also it like makes Hottie Jin really, really small and all that stuff. I'm also a fan of Split Up because if we wipe their board, it's very powerful. We also, though, have to be really aware that they run counter magic, so we have to be really aware of like casting things that cost 1 million mana. That being said, I'm not a fan of Beza. It doesn't block anything that's relevant. This is this high sideboard against Azorius Oculus, or Azorius Tempo, or whatever you want to call it. The seventh most popular deck is the Jeskai Convoke deck. Against Jeskai Convoke, I'm a big fan of Split Up. I also like Elspeth's Smite. Being able to snipe some stuff that attacks feels really good. We're going to be shaving on Archangel Elspeth, and then shaving down on Caretaker's Talent, because, again, similar to the aggressive decks, like Jeskai Convoke can be very explosive, and that is very scary. So it's sideboard against Jeskai Convoke. We've already talked about the eighth most popular deck, which is Mono Red Prowess. The ninth most popular deck is Domain. Against Domain, we are bringing in the Stone Brain. Being able to hit most things is relevant, specifically like Up the Beanstalk or White Overlord are powerful things to hit. Also, Exercise is excellent against Domain. We're going to be bringing out Split Up, and then we're going to be shaving on Sunfall. We really just got to outcard them. That's the name of the game. So this is how I sideboard against Domain. And the 10th most popular deck is the Mirror Match, is Mono White Token Control. In the Mirror, we're bringing in Exercise. There's a bunch of enchantments that are great to deal with. And then we were bringing in the Stone Brain. Being able to hit Enduring Innocence or Caretaker's Talent is both like very powerful. And you're like taking out Split Up. I like shaving on a Sunfall because we don't want to have too many of those gumming up our deck. And then we're going to shave on Lay Down Arms as well. So that's how I sideboard in the Mirror Match. So if you look at this sideboard, Elspeth Smite, mostly for the aggressive decks, but also decent against the enduring cards. Destroy Evil for decks that have big budded creatures that we have a hard time attacking through, but also our enchantment hate. Rest in Peace is our graveyard hate. Split Up one-sided board wipes. Raise the Pass against decks that just run a lot of removal we need to rebuild against. Protect the Negotiators mostly against board wipes. And Tishana's Tiebinder against decks that have these triggered abilities that we feel like would be good to stop. So the most popular deck in Standard is the Esper Self-Bounce deck. Against Esper Self-Bounce, I like Tishana's Tidebinder just to stop some of these triggered abilities. And I actually don't like the rest of these cards. I'm actually just looking to just like super aggro them out. And so I'm gonna sideboard out these clunky cards, bring in Tishana's Tidebinder, and that's how I'm going to sideboard against Esper. Notably, it's also how I'm going to sideboard against the Dimir Self-Bounce deck, which is the 5th most popular deck. Speaking of Dimir, the 2nd most popular deck is Dimir Midrange. Against Dimir Midrange, we're going to be siding this Elspeth Smite, being able to take out these attacking creatures so they can never Kaido, and being able to exile Enduring Curiosity and stuff like that is super powerful. I'm a fan of Split Up because they're very reliant on creatures just like we are, and I'm a fan of Raise the Pass just because they sideboard into a lot of removal spells. Going to be sideboarding Eldiv Sheltered by Ghost just because it's really easy for them to answer and to stop, and we're just going to be shaving a Steel Seraph just to get a little less clunky, and this is how I sideboard against Dimir Midrange. The 3rd most popular deck is Golgari Midrange. We're going to be siding Destroy Evil so we can get rid of the like Shieldrids and Preacher of the Schisms. And we're deciding to Raise the Pass because they run an insane amount of removal. Bringing out Sheltered by Ghosts because it'll never stick around for very long, to be totally honest with you. And then we're shaving on a Steel Seraph just like we are against Dimir. That's how I sideboard against Golgari Midrange. The 4th most popular deck is Gruul Aggro. Against Gruul Aggro, we're bringing in the Elspeth Smite. Just has additional removal, bringing in this Split Up as this one-sided board wipe. And then we're just going to be siding out of these slower cards, bringing out Raise the Pass and 2 of the Enduring Curiosities, and leaning on our main deck Sheltered by Ghosts, and this is how I sideboard against Gruul Aggro. The 5th most popular deck we've already talked about, Dimir Self-Bounce. Against Gruul Prowess and Mono Red Prowess, we're also going to be sideboarding the same as we did as against Gruul Aggro. So Gruul Prowess is the 6th most popular deck, and Mono Red is the 9th most popular deck. Just as a reminder, this is how we are sideboarding against those decks. And so let's move on to the 7th most popular deck, which is Azorius Tempo. Against Azorius Tempo, we are bringing in our Rest in Peace, so they can't do their crazy reanimation nut. Destroy Evil, so that we can get rid of the stuff after it's already entered the battlefield. Then we're going to be bringing out Raise the Pass, and bringing out Sheltered by Ghost. This isn't an aggro deck, and it's not going to stay on the battlefield very long, especially post-board. So this is how I sideboard against Azorius Tempo, Azorius Oculus, whatever you want to call it. The 8th most popular deck is Jeskai Convoke. Against Jeskai Convoke, we are bringing in our Split Ups. And I actually like Tishana's Tidebinder against this deck as well, because we can counter the Knight Errant and the Imidane's Recruiter triggers and things like that. Going to be bringing out Raise the Pass, and frankly, these cards that are not very fast and can be kind of clunky because we need to make sure we stay on our toes against this deck. So this is how I sideboard against Jeskai Convoke. The 9th most popular deck is Mono Red. We've already talked about that deck. And then the 10th most popular deck is Mono White. We're going to be bringing in our Destroy Evils, our Protect the Negotiators, and then we're going to be siding out of this just creature removal. We don't need Sheltered by Ghosts or Unidentified Hover Ship or Raise the Pass because a lot of their removal is Exile. And so this is how I'm going to sideboard against Mono White Caretaker. So this is Selesnya Cage in Standard. And let's talk about the sideboard, just like the original plan is. We're playing 2 Elspeth Smite for aggressive decks, but also the enduring creatures. We're playing a single Destroy Evil against blockers with big butts, like in Golgari, but also good enchantment hate. Invasion of Gobekon as sort of additional hate against board wipes, because that's why we have Aven Interrupter in here. Sheltered by Ghosts for additional hate against the red decks, joining the 2 Sheltered by Ghosts in the main deck. The 4 Aven Interrupter, like I said, is hate against board wipes is the big thing. This is a green-white aggro deck in essence, so a single board wipe can really be very bad for this deck. But also it's decent against decks that are looking to like tap out for stuff like big mana things. We're playing 2 Split Up as a one-sided board wipe on our side, and 2 more Wiltleaf Liege, mostly because Wiltleaf Liege is a decent card, to bring in if we need to bring some stuff out, but also really, really good against the bounce decks, being able to just put it on the battlefield if they play Hopeless Nightmare. So, the most popular deck in Standard is Gruul Aggro. We're going to sideboard the same against Gruul Aggro as we do against Gruul Prowess, which is the 6th most popular deck, and Mono Red Prowess, which is the 8th most popular deck. So it's going to sideboard against all of them. We're bringing the Elspeth Smites, obviously. We're bringing in the Sheltered by Ghosts, bringing in the Split Ups, and we're going to be bringing out the Collector's Cages. It's just too cute. Like, I realize like we get to cheat big things on the battlefield, but it's simply too cute, and I'm bringing out the 2 Wiltleaf Lieges. I like the Overlords just because we're able to have these 2/2/1s with flying. It's a lot of blockers. The trample hurts, but I think it's worth it. So that's how I'm going to sideboard against Gruul Aggro, Gruul Prowess, and Mono Red. The second most popular deck is Esper Self Bounce, and we're going to sideboard the same against Dimir Self Bounce as well. I'm a fan of Elspeth Smite. It pretty much kills everything in the deck besides like Kaido. And doing that is pretty important. And we're bringing in the 2 Wiltleaf Lieges to kind of get them with the Hopeless Nightmare silliness. We're going to be taking out the Sheltered by Ghosts. It is for the aggressive decks. And we're going to be taking out the Malira. They aren't necessarily like directly destroying our guys. Instead, it's things like Nowhere to Run and whatever. Postboard, there's a little bit more, but I still don't think it's worth it. So that's how I'm going to sideboard against Esper and Dimir Self Bounce, which is the 2nd and 3rd most popular deck in Standard. Moving on to the 4th most popular deck in Standard is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari, we are bringing in Destroy Evil. I'm also a fan of the Aven Interrupters because, one, they have like an adventure card and we kind of get them with that, which is kind of cute, but also Harvester of Misery can be pretty devastating, as well as things like Gix's Command and things like that. That being said, it means Invasion of Gogon is also pretty good. Bringing out the Wiltleaf Lieges, bringing out the Seraphic Steeds, mostly just because it's really hard to capitalize on it when they're killing our guys, and we need to make sure things live in order for that to happen. We're taking out the Sheltered by Ghosts. It's just, yes, it's removal, but it's just not good enough removal. I'll just be shaving a single Paw Patch Recruit, and this is how I'm going to sideboard against Golgari Midrange. The 5th most popular deck is Dimir Midrange. Against Dimir Midrange, because of Gix's Command and Malicious Intent, we're bringing in the Aven Interrupters and Invasion of Gobakons. And then we are going to be bringing out similar things, the Seraphic Steeds, the Wiltleaf Lieges, and the Sheltered by Ghosts. Not really much else I care about in the sideboard, so that's how I'm going to sideboard against Dimir Midrange. We already talked about the 6th most popular deck, which is Gruul Prowess. So the 7th most popular deck is Domain. Against Domain, Destroy Evil is absolutely unreal. We also have to bring in Invasion of Gobakon and Aven Interrupter. They combo with each other, by the way, which is pretty dope because like a single Sunfall can just end the game for us in like a lot of situations. And so bringing out Sheltered by Ghosts like we do against every non-aggressive deck, bringing out Wiltleaf Lieges, again, because they are really in our deck for the bounce decks, which is, they're very popular, so it's totally fine. Bringing up Malira because most of the destroying or whatever is exile removal, and then Seraphic Steed because they just have a lot of removal, especially post board. So that's how I'm going to sideboard against the Zer Overlord's Domain deck. We've already talked about the 8th most popular deck, which is Mono Red Prowess. So moving on to Jeskai Convoke, we'll be bringing in our Elspeth Smites. Also, Shelter by Ghost pretty good because it is an aggro deck. And then Split Up is very, very good as well. We're bringing out these Wiltleaf Lieges. We'll be bringing out the Maliras. And then we are going to shave on Overlord of the Mistmores. Just because I don't really like this card against Convoke, because yes, it can block 2 things for 4 mana. Very rarely do we actually get to kill anything that is relevant, and they're going so wide, just like 2 blockers isn't quite good enough, especially when we have pay 4 mana for it. So that's how I'm going to sideboard against Jeskai Convoke. And then lastly, the 10th most popular deck in Standard is the Azorius Tempo deck, the Azorius Oculus deck, whatever you want to call it. Destroy Evil is great. It beats up the 2 cards that actually matter. We're bringing in Split Up because, again, it's really important to answer those 2 cards. You know, that's super, super important. We're bringing out the Shelter by Ghosts, and then we're going to shave on a Wiltleaf Liege, and that's how we sideboard against Azorius Oculus. As far as the sideboard goes, Elspeth's Smite is for these aggressive decks and enduring cards. What are you doing? Destroy Evil for enchantments and obviously creatures with 4 or greater. Yeah, you're gonna do that. Okay, I gotta record though. Okay. Whoa! What's microphone over it? Okay. Exercise similarly, but it exiles, which is better against the enduring cards. Monastery Mentor when we need more threats. Temporary Lockdown is a board wipe against small permanent decks. Negate for board wipe. I'm mostly against board wipes, but also cards that may be relevant. And Ghost Vacuum is our Graveyard Hate. So the most popular deck in Standard is Dimir Midrange. We're going to be bringing in Elspeth's Smite. Dealing with the aggro is extremely powerful. Going to be bringing in Negate. And they're going to be shaving on a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to totally cut Unsummon. Just doesn't really do anything. And then we're going to shave on Chart a Course. And then we're going to shave on Moment of Truth. I like shaving a split on that. You're going to see that pretty often. But that's how I sideboard against Dimir Midrange. Hey, could we not mess with the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I will not miss it.
Especially not the cord. Don't touch the cord, okay? The second most popular deck in Standard is Esper Self Bounce. Against Esper Self Bounce, Temporary Lockdown is very powerful. Being able to deal with all the stuff that they are bouncing. Also a giant fan of Negate, being able to deal with the sounding big enough. We're taking out Unsummon just because we don't want to help them bouncing. And then we're going to shave really, really similar things as the last deck. And so that's how I sideboard against Esper Self Bounce. Golgari Midrange is the third most popular deck in Standard. Against Golgari, we're bringing a Monastery Mentor just because we want more threats. We're going to be siding out of Negate just because it doesn't do too much. Okay. And we're going to be shaving on the things that we normally shave. And that's how I sideboard against Golgari Midrange. Fourth most popular deck is Gruul Aggro, but also the fifth most popular deck is Gruul Prowess, and the eighth most popular deck is Mono Red Prowess. So we're going to sideboard the same against all of those. I'm going to be bringing in Elspeth's Smite to deter the aggro. Going to bring in Temporary Lockdown similarly. Then I'm a fan of Monastery Mentor just to provide more blockers, especially profitable blockers. We're going to be taking out Unsummon because all their stuff is all so cheap. And then we're going to be cutting on Chart a Course and also cutting on Negate. And that's how I sideboard against Gruul Prowess and Gruul Aggro and Mono Red Aggro. So skipping ahead to the sixth most popular deck is the Mirror Match, is Azorius Tempo. We're going to be siding in Negate. And we're going to be siding in Ghost Vacuum for that Graveyard Hate. And also Destroy Evil is pretty powerful against this deck as well. Because of Graveyard Hate and like a bunch of other ways to deal with stuff, we're going to side out of this some number of the Reanimation package. And then we are going to side out of our Flex slots. And so sideboard in the Mirror Match. The seventh most popular deck is Jeskai Convoke. Against Jeskai Convoke, I like Elspeth's Smite just to snipe some attackers here or there. Temporary Lockdown is also very, very solid. Other than that, we're going to siding out of Negate. Siding out of Unsummon, just because a lot of the stuff have entered the battlefield triggers, and then we're going to shave on a Chart a Course. And that's how I sideboard against Jeskai Convoke. Where I talked about Mono Red Prowess sitting in 8th, but the 9th most popular deck is Domain. Against Domain, this Enchantment Hate is extremely powerful. So we're bringing in Destroy Evil and Exercise. Also, Negate is extremely powerful as well. And then they have a lot of answers, so bringing in Monastery Mentor is also strong. Unsummon doesn't really do anything to speak of, so we're going to be taking that out. Same thing with Split Up. We really have to lean into our tempo plan. And we're going to shave on Recommission. Soul Partition really doesn't do anything because they just have so much mana all the time, so we're going to cut on that. And then we're going to shave our Chart a Course and a Moment of Truth. And so that's how I sideboard against Domain. The 10th most popular deck is Mono White Token Control, Mono White Caretaker, or whatever you want to call it. Against this deck, we are bringing in our... Whoops, I think I messed it up. Yeah. Against this deck, we are bringing in our Destroy Evils for Enchantment Hate. We're bringing in an Exercise similarly. Going to bring in our Negates. And then we're going to be siding out of Unsummon because there's not a lot of creatures to unsummon. Going to shave on a Recommission and then we are going to shave on Chart a Course. And so this is how I sideboard against mono white. So this is Gruul Delirium. We've already talked about the main deck, so we're just going to leave that. But as far as the sideboard goes, Torch Tower, very good against aggressive decks. Also Exiles, which is good against Enduring and Heartfire Hero. Abrade is a 2-mana instant, deal 3 damage to target creature, destroy target artifact. Good against aggressive decks, decent removal. Also main deck Artifact Hate, which is a little bit, artifacts are a little bit more popular after Aether Drift. Playing Obliterating Bolt gets things with big butts out of the way. Also, again, Exiles, so really good against the Enduring creatures. And decent against the aggressive decks. Pyroclasm's a board wipe that doesn't really kill that many of our creatures, but allows us to deal 2 damage to each creature to be able to wipe the board of these weenie decks, these Convoke decks or red decks. Screaming Nemesis is excellent against decks that are looking to block or have damage-based removal. It's a 3/3 with haste. Whenever Screaming Nemesis is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any other target. If a player is dealt damage this way, they can't gain life the rest of the game. Just a good hasty threat that's really, really hard to block to answer. Playing a 1 of Chandra Spark Hunter. This is a 4-mana Planeswalker with starts with 4 loyalty. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose up to 1 vehicle you control. Until end of turn, it becomes an artifact creature and gains haste. That doesn't really matter, except for its own 0 ability. +2 is you may sacrifice an artifact or discard a card if you do draw a card. So this allows us to fill up our graveyard a little bit more with Delirium, allows us to sort of have card selection. Its 0s, we create a 3/2 colorless vehicle artifact token with Crew 1, which remember, Chandra can mana up by herself, especially the turn it comes out because it gives a haste. As my 7 is you get an emblem with whenever an artifact you control enters, this emblem deals 3 damage to any target. So that just says win the game in this deck. Like let's be totally real. So really we're playing this against decks that are really good at answering what we're doing or go super long because this is much harder to answer a permanent. We could play a Witchstalker Frenzy in the sideboard for things with big butts to get out of the way. Also fine for racing against aggressive decks. It costs 1 less for each creature that attack this turn. So in this deck, it very often costs 1 and deals 5 damage to target creature. So perfect size for Shield Druid, etc., etc. Could play a Paw Patch formation. It's a 2-mana instant. Destroy target enchantment, destroy target creature with flying, draw a card, create a food token. It can replace itself, which is awesome, but great enchantment hate. The flying thing doesn't really matter in standard right now. We could play a single Tranquil Frillback. So this is one of those Jack of all trades, Master of none cards. It's a 3-mana 3/3, and when it enters, we can pay green up to 3 times, and each time we get to choose one of these effects. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, exile target player's graveyard, or you gain 4 life. So decent against aggro because you gain life, really good artifact and enchantment hate, good graveyard hate. The thing is, it's not excellent at any of these things, but it can come in a lot of matchups. And we're playing 2 Haywire Might, which is a 1-mana 1/1. When it dies, you gain 2 life, and we can pay green, sacrifice Haywire Might to exile target non-creature artifact or enchantment. Decent artifact and enchantment hate, decent against aggro because you gain life, and it's a creature and an artifact, so it's good for Delirium. So let's talk about the top 10 decks and how to sideboard against them. The most popular deck is the Gruul aggro deck, basically mono red splashing green. We're going to decide all this removal, Torch the Tower, Braid, Obliterating Bolt, Pyroclasm. I like Screaming Nemesis too. Trickle Fillback to block and gain life. And Witchstalker Frenzy just has additional removal. We have 11 card sideboard for the Gruul aggro deck. Again, not the mirror, the aggro deck. We'll be sideboarding the same against Gruul Prowess and Mono Red Prowess as well. And we're going to be siding out anything that's slow or doesn't just directly attack on its own. Just important that it is good nearly entirely on its own. We're going to side out of these exhaust combos because we often don't have time to activate them, and they're bad blockers. Side out a single run and Realm Breaker, even though it can create a 3/3, like I'm not super interested in that compared to everything else in our deck, and this time I'm going to sideboard against those 3 red-based aggro decks. The second most popular deck is Esper Self Bounce. We're going to sideboard the same as Dimir Self Bounce as well. Abrade is super good, is able to kill every creature, especially Fear of Isolation, so they can never Kaido. Witchstalker Frenzy, also a fun card. I'm also a fan of Obliterating Bolt, and Paw Patch Formation is actually pretty decent for the Destroy a Flying and not. And we're going to decide out of things that are miserable when they're sent back to our hands, because remember, they have a lot of removal. I'm not a fan of Torch the Tower, though, to start. Violent Urge is just too easy for them to interact, so I'm not a giant fan of it. And we're going to side out of a few Afterburner Expert, because getting that sent back to my hand is really miserable. So this is how we're going to sideboard against Esper Pixie and Dimir Bounce. Which brings us to the fourth most popular deck, which is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari, they're trying to kill our creatures. Like, that is just straight up what is happening. And they have decent blockers. So we're going to be siding in Chandra Spark Hunter, the 2 Obliterating Bull, and Witchstalker Frenzy. These guys to get blockers out of the way, and this to go, and Chandra to go long and have a more difficult to answer permanent if it's needed. We side now Torch Tower. We just don't need it. Violent Urge. They have too many removal spells and a Beastie Beatdown. We can't rely on having a creature all the time. This is how I'm going to sideboard again. And a lot of stuff has Death Touch too, but this is how I sideboard against the Golgari midrange deck. The fifth most popular deck is Domain. Against Domain, I'm a fan of Obliterating Bolt. It deals with it deals with a lot of the overlords and also deals with Zur pretty cleanly. Similar thing with Witchstalker Frenzy. We hate enchantments with Pop Ash Formation. We hate enchantments with Trago Frillback. We hate enchantments with Haywire Might. However, this game's going to go really long and they have a lot of removal spells. So we're going to side out this Torch the Tower and Violent Urge again. Alongside Beastie Beatdown, we have cleaner answers that are coming in. And they don't really use their graveyard, so we're going to shave on Keen-Eyed Curator, and this is how I'm going to sideboard against Domain. The sixth most popular deck is the Dimir midrange deck. Often now sporting Oil Deep Gear Hulk. So it's started to attack your hand a lot more, which means I like Torch the Tower. Deals with a bat pretty easily. Similar thing with a Braid being able to take out the Gear Hulk. Obliterating Bolt deals with pretty much everything in the deck as well, indefinitely. Witchstalker Frenzy, similar experience. And we're going to be siding out a lot of the same cards as the Golgari deck. So this time on sideboard against Dimir. The seventh most popular deck is Gruul Prowess, we've already talked about. Eighth is Mono Red Prowess, which we've already talked about, which brings us to Jeskai Convoke as the ninth most popular deck. We're bringing a bunch of this removal, especially Pyroclasm. Pyroclasm, so good. Screaming Nemesis. Yeah, we're just going to bring all of this removal in. Keep them off being able to combo and Convoke and just apply a ton of pressure. They're an aggro deck, so we're going to get rid of a lot of the stuff that doesn't really do anything when it by itself. And that's how I'm going to sideboard against the Jeskai Convoke deck. And the 10th most popular deck is Azorius Tempo, Azorius Oculus, the Reanimator deck, whatever you want to call it. Sideboard and Screaming Nemesis because their things are huge very often, so it's kind of hard to block. Witchstalker Frenzy answers both of their major threats. Pop Ash Formation kills those major threats. And we're siding out of Torch the Tower. We'll be siding out of Violent Urge. And take out a Beastie Beatdown again, just because they have a lot of ways to bounce and all that stuff. So it's on the sideboard against Azorius Oculus. So this is Boros Convoke. As far as the sideboard goes, Get Lost, great enchantment hate, and really good against creatures that kind of have big butts and we're having a hard time attacking through. Invasion of Gobakhan is mostly for board wipes and I guess combo decks. Rest in Peace, great graveyard hate. Sheltered by Ghosts, mostly for aggro decks. Split Up, again, mostly for aggro decks, but really just like heavy creature-based decks. Torture Tower for aggro decks, but also decent against the enduring cards. And Urbrass Forge for decks that go really, really long. That being said, the most popular deck in Standard is Gruul Aggro, and we're actually going to be sideboarding the same against Gruul Prowess and Mono Red Prowess as well. We will be siding in the Get Lost, the Sheltered by Ghosts, the Split Up, and the Torch the Towers. And we're going to be sideboarding out, first and foremost, these cards that don't really do anything when they enter, or are just like a little expensive. I'm going to shave on Clockwork Percussionist. That's actually going to happen a lot. It's kind of like the flex slot in the deck. And then a split between Immodane's Recruiter and Resolute Reinforcements. Resolute Reinforcements has a really hard time blocking properly, and Immodane's Recruiter, we're going to be blocking enough that it's kind of hard to make Immodane's Recruiter relevant. So that's how I'm going to sideboard against the red base aggro decks. The second most popular deck in Standard is Esper Self Bounce. We're actually going to sideboard the same against Esper Self Bounce and Dimir Self Bounce. Against this deck, I like Torch the Tower and Get Lost. Just has this creature removal. It's really all I want, though. You're siding out of these Clockwork Percussionists and some more Legis Call. Other than that, I want to stick to the primary game plan just with additional removal. So I sideboard against the bounce decks. I already talked about the third most popular deck, which is Dimir Self Bounce. So the fourth most popular deck is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari, Get Lost is excellent. I'm actually a fan of Invasion of Gobakhan because of Gix's command. And we're going to be siding out of Resolute Reinforcements. Doesn't really do much. And shaving a Clockwork Percussionist. That's how I'm going to sideboard against Golgari Midrange. The fifth most popular deck is Domain. Obviously, Get Lost is excellent because of all the enchantments and the big butted creatures. Invasion of Gobakhan is important so you don't get Zernutted and to slow down the Sunfalls. Also, I've stopped siding in Urbrass Forge just because of authority of the consoles. It's mostly for like other slower decks, like non-white slower decks. That being said, we're going to take out Case just because it's kind of hard for us to have enough creatures to actually kill something with Case. And we're also going to side out a single Sanguine Evangelist just because it's a little slow, and we have to be able to fight through board wipes. So that's how I'm going to sideboard against Domain. The 6th most popular deck is the Dimir mid-range deck. Against this deck, I'm in love with Torch, the Tower. Get Lost is excellent. And we're just going to be siding out of these Resolute Reinforcements. That's how I sideboard against Dimir mid-range. We already talked about the 7th and 8th most popular decks, which is School Prowess and Mono Red Prowess. So the 9th most popular deck is Jeskai Convoke, the counterpart to this deck. And we're going to be bringing in the Torch, the Towers. We're going to be bringing in the Split Up. I don't think I'm a big fan of Shelter by Ghosts. And I don't think we can afford to bring in Get Lost as well. It's mostly just going to be who's the faster deck. We're going to bring out the Sanguine Evangelist and then a single Resolute Reinforcements. I actually really like War Leader's Call because it makes our creatures just bigger and it makes it easier to block and attack. But this is on my sideboard against Jeskai Convoke. The 10th most popular deck is Azorius Tempo, the Hottie Djinn, Aberranoculus, that stuff. Get Lost is pretty good. Split Up is pretty good. Rest in Peace is pretty good. And our plan is just to go as underneath them as possible. War Leader's Call, we're sideboard out of these 3-mana things that don't deal a ton of damage. So I'm going to sideboard against the Azorius Tempo deck. So this is the Simic Crab deck. As far as the sideboard goes, you're going to notice something weird. We're playing some black cards. The reason we can play black cards is, one, we can play Gloomlake Verge instead of Islands in this deck. So we have some black mana anyway. And then we can side in the Swamp, which we can grab with Analyze the Pollen or Bushwhack. So really we have 4, 10, 11 black sources, but also we can grab it when we mill cards with Seed of Hope and Cash Grab. So it's pretty easy to grab these black mana. And it shores up some aggro matchups, which is really important. Now, as far as the sideboard goes, we're playing Shrouded Shepherd. The reason we're playing Shrouded Shepherd is we're never going to cast the white side, but it's a permanent that we can grab with Analyze the Pollen, Seed of Hope, and Cash Grab to then be able to Cleave of Shadows, which is the adventure side of it, to have creatures your opponent control get -2, -1, -1 till end of turn. Very good against different aggressive strategies. Minor Misstep, again, pretty solid against aggressive strategies or really like pseudo mirror matches. Negate, good against dozens of cards and decks. They can't really talk about all of them, similar with Tishana's Tidebinder. Anoint with Affliction, very good against these aggressive decks, especially good against Heartfire Hero because it exiles without being dealt, and get rid of it without you being dealt damage. Also very good against like Enduring Innocence. Go for the Throat is reasonable unconditional removal. Nowhere to Run is pretty fun against these aggressive decks because we can also like bounce it back to our hand if we keep any amount of this tiny big enough in. Picker Poison, very good against mostly enchantments, also artifacts, and very rarely flying creatures. There aren't that many in the format we care about. Terra Sunder is great against artifacts and enchantments as well. However, we can bring it in alongside our Swamp to beat these decks that are just going to go along with us and we need to answer cards like Shield Druid or whatever. Keen-Eye Curator is an awesome graveyard hit card. It's a 2-mana 3/3. As long as there are 4 more card types among cards exiled with Keen-Eye Curator, it gets +4/+4 and has Trample. We can pay 1 mana to exile target card from a graveyard. And then we have the Swarm Weaver, which is a 4-mana 2/3. When it enters, create 2 1/1 black and green insect creature tokens with flying. As Delirium, as long as there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, insects and spiders you control get +1/+1 and have Death Touch. So it's really easy to have Delirium. And if we're self-bouncing a whole bunch, either with Unsummon or this tiny big enough or whatever, replaying Swarm Weaver over and over is just very, very powerful and allows us to go super, super, super wide. That being said, the most popular deck in Standard is the Esper Self-Bounce deck. Against Esper Self-Bounce, I like Minor Misstep because it counters Storm Teacher's Talent, Hopeless Nightmare, and Nurturing Pixie, Optimistic Scavenger, all that stuff. Negate's also decent because if we can counter this tiny big enough, that's like real bad for our opponent. We're also going to be siding in these black cards and Shrouded Shepherd and the Swarm Weaver. Going really wide is really strong against the Esper deck, especially cards that like don't like to be bounced to your hand. And creatures your opponent control get -1/-1 mean that it's a clean answer to things like Nurturing Pixie and Optimistic Scavenger, sometimes Mockingbird, and then also sometimes the Otter, which means we're also going to be bringing in the Swamp, which means we're going to be bringing out an island. We're not going to be looking to unsummon any cards here, and so we're going to bring out those unsummon Rona's Vortex. And so that's how I'm going to sideboard against the Esper Self-Bounce deck. And while we're here, I kind of want to talk about the Dimir Self-Bounce deck as well. I don't think Shrouded Shepherd is as good, so we're not going to be sideboarding that in, so we're just going to keep in Arona's Vortex. The Dimir Self-Bounce deck is the 3rd most popular deck, so this is how I sideboard against that. That being said, the 2nd most popular deck is the Gruul Aggro deck. This is alongside the Gruul Prowess deck in 6th most popular and the Mono Red Prowess deck in the 9th most popular. We're going to sideboard the same against all of those. Where Minor Misstep is super-duper good. Anoint with Affliction is great. Go for the Throat is great. Nowhere to Run is absolutely great. Swarm Weaver is really good because we can block so much, and that also means we need to bring in our Swamp. We're going to be siding out of Up the Beanstalk. We do not care at all about card advantage. And then we're going to be shaving on This Town Ain't Big Enough. We get to keep one in, which is nice because we can just like do cute stuff with Nowhere to Run. But This Town Ain't Big Enough just really isn't good in the sense that like we don't have time to do the cute things by bouncing our stuff or whatever. So this is sideboard against those 3 red aggro decks. So moving on to the 4th most popular deck is Golgari Midrange. Against the Golgari Midrange deck, we're bringing in these black cards as well. Anoint with Affliction and Go for the Throat, both very powerful cards against this deck. Also means we're bringing in the Swamp. Swarm Weaver is a great midrange card. And I'm actually a fan of Terra Sunder, just for casting it for 4 mana to get rid of big things like Shieldred. We're going to be sideboarding out of Seed of Hope and Unsummon. Please. There we go. And Unsummon. We're not good at playing the mid-range game with them. We just need to be beating them as fast as possible. And Cash Grab is better at milling our stuff. Removing stuff with Bushwhack is nice. We can't take out any Bushwhack or Analyze the Pollen because we need to grab those swamps. And so being able to outcard them with Up the Beanstalk and This Town Ain't Big Enough shenanigans is how we beat them. So that's how I'm going to sideboard against Golgari Midrange. The 5th most popular deck is the Dimir Midrange deck. Against Dimir Midrange, I'm loving these cards that can answer their stuff. Negate is absolutely excellent as well. Swarm Reaver, very good. Also Shrouded Shepherd dealing with like Fairy Mastermind and Floodpits Drowner and stuff like that is like really cute as well. Also means we need to bring in our Swamp. And Bounce is just generally really bad against Dimir Midrange because they can just replay it. So we're bringing out the Rona's Vortex, we're bringing out the Unsummons, and then we're bringing out This Town Ain't Big Enough. I think we can only bring out 3. Nope. Okay, bring out all 4. So it's on a sideboard against Dimir Midrange. We've already talked about Gruul Prowess, which is the 6th most popular deck. So the 7th most popular deck is Domain. Against Domain, we are bringing in the Negates. Very good against like almost everything in the deck. Just shot as Tidebinders, excellent as well. Pick Your Poison, very good. Terra Sunder, very good. And we're going to be siding out of Bushwhack. We don't really need to fix our mana because we're not bringing the Swamp in and stuff, and we're not going to be able to fight and kill stuff profitably. And we're going to be bringing out 2 Up the Beanstalk. We're not looking to go long. We're looking to just beat them. So I sideboard against Domain. The 8th most popular deck is Jeskai Convoke. Against Jeskai Convoke, Minor Misstep is super good. Shrouded Shepherd, obviously, super good. And then we're bringing in all this removal suite. Also, Tishana's Tidebinder is kind of cute against like Knight Errant and Imidane's Recruiter and stuff. And Swarm Reaver, just 1 more blockers, which also means we need to bring in the Swamp. Bringing out the Island. Up the Beanstalk is really bad. We just don't have time to do shenanigan-y stuff. And thus we kind of need to cut the This Town Ain't Big Enough stuff as well. We can play straight up against this deck. This is our sideboard against the Jeskai Convoke deck. The 9th most popular deck is Mono Red Prowess, which we already talked about, which brings us to the 10th most popular deck, which is the Azorius Oculus Azorius Tempo deck. Minor Misstep, very good against this deck. So is Negate, it just counters almost everything in the deck. And then we're going to be bringing in some of this block removal. Nowhere to Run doesn't really beat anything. Pick Your Poison is absolutely excellent. Keen-Eyed Curator is excellent. Since we're bringing black anyway, we're bringing in the Swarm Weaver, and then we're bringing in the Swamp. Now we're not looking to grind against this deck, so I'm not a fan of Up the Beanstalk. It's another one of those decks that we're looking to get their few creatures out of the way and just like jam in as hard as we can. We're not really going to be fighting their creatures as well, so we're going to be taking out some Bushwhack. Then we're just going to shave on a Seed of Hope. So this is how I sideboard against Azorius Oculus. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social media. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.